It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yeah, baby. This week's starring special guest star, Mr. Michael Kruk. Yeah. All the way from the beautiful United Kingdom. And thank you, fake band. Thank you, fake audience. Welcome to the big show.
Thanks for having me.
Don't you feel really special now?
You got the There's the
band.
Famous machine.
Yep.
Awesome.
Oh, that's right. You've actually watched episodes.
Yeah.
Come on in a little.
All right.
Let me get the chat open. Where did they go? There they are. Hi, chatters. On occasion, I've had guests on the show that have not seen an episode. And when I bring out the band and start playing the music and do the applause, the look on their face is just like, what the hell am I doing this for? The shock is really hysterical. So, Michael and I have never actually met in person until about a half an hour ago. But we video chatted some time ago, and he has been running listings with Taxi. He's one of several UK libraries that runs listings with us. And he spends a lot of time in the US, so we're really tickled pink. He actually came all the way up from San Diego to do the show today, so grateful for that.
Hey, no problem. Nice to be here.
What we're going to do today is we are going to listen to a bunch of music and get Michael's feedback. I also want to mention the fact that Bria will post a link at some point, maybe now. He's got a great course, and I actually watched a bunch of the videos for the course, so I do want to plug it, and it's called Music for Income. I got that right?
Yeah.
Yay, I got an A. You know, there are a lot of people with a lot of courses out there right now. It's a little bit of an epidemic of the number of courses, but I said to him before I would mention it that I wanted to watch some of it, and I did watch it, and I went, wow, it's not just good information, but it's presented well, and it's in a logical order, and you'll get a taste for who he is, and when you see who he is and how he speaks and how he looks at stuff today, that'll give you an indication about how good the course is. And so there you go. So how long have you've been a composer for quite a number of years, right? And have a bunch of stuff in other people's libraries before you started your own and all that kind of stuff. What got you into doing TV and film music, and did you do record stuff before that or something? Or?
Yeah, so I was a freelance drummer in the UK. I came out of school at like about 19 and went straight into that, and great. I mean, I managed to tick off a bunch of things I wanted to do. I wanted to play drums on a track and hear it on the radio. I wanted to do something on a record that sold on platinum status, and so I did these things, which was amazing.
And you accomplished them.
Yeah,
nice.
I know, it was great. And
a bucket list that actually was achieved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not dead or anything.
Right.
Good for you.
Right. So I got to the point where I loved, and I still do some of the drumming thing, but I was like, I want to do something else, and I'd always liked writing. I always had like little ideas. I had an old Korg 01WFD. Do you remember those?
Yes.
And they had the little sequencer on, and it had this screen about this big, and you had to go through like 5-6 menus to
So I remember it well.
I had one of those, and I always liked writing. But I used to write like little chunks of ideas. So I'd have these little old school discs that would go in, and it wouldn't be fully fledged songs. It would be little bits of ideas. And I remember speaking to some people who were like, oh, maybe you should look at TV music because you can get a germ of an idea and just,
I love that. A germ of an idea.
Yeah. And so I started looking into that, and then eventually I started trying to pitch for a few TV shows through some people I knew. Didn't get anything. For years, and then eventually got a documentary about horses.
Interesting.
So got asked to write music for a documentary about horses.
So did you score it top to bottom?
Yeah.
Or just incidental stuff? I mean, you did the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the funny thing about that is that I kind of felt like you don't want to tell someone, oh, this is the first documentary that I've ever written. Like, everyone's got to have their first time, right? But,
yeah.
So I remember the lady was speaking to me on the phone, and she was like, yes, and we're going to go into the offline edit on this day. And I was like frantically Wikipediaing these terms.
What's offline?
What is that? And I was like, okay, fine. But I was really lucky. I had an editor, I had a picture editor who guided me through it. And it was my first introduction to really working to picture with someone who was putting the picture first, and what the music should do and shouldn't do, and it was a real education. And then from there, just composed a whole bunch of shows, documentaries, Natural History Unit, who do all the Blue Planet 2 and Planet Earth stuff. So I don't do those because that's Hans Zimmer's guys, but the kind of smaller ones of those I do. Started up the music library with a friend, and then it's just been a mixture of library tracks, the music library itself, so being on both sides of the coin. It's quite interesting, and still doing the custom scoring jobs.
Give me a couple of good examples of things that are different when you're creating music to picture, and then creating music kind of offline that eventually will have to work with picture, but you never get to see the picture. What are some of the observations?
Right. This is a really good question. I mean, one of the reasons that I like writing music not to picture is I think that if you're someone who really likes a lot of freedom within your writing, you can get that, and you can also work within, I guess contrary to that as well, but you can work within certain structures. So I believe that certain structures are going to work, say for library music, right? Because they tend to, which maybe we'll talk about it more in a bit, but they'll tend to follow an arc that a TV show will use. So you'll kind of go, if you're watching enough TV shows, you start seeing these little repeated arcs, and if you're just kind of following those, then editors are going to find that really usable.
I think it's somewhat easier than writing songs, because they're just less moving parts, and you don't have to create a lyric if you're doing instrumental stuff, which saves a ton of effort and a ton of time recording a vocal, getting a good performance, recording backgrounds, all the extra mixing time. So I'm a huge fan of instrumentals. And the word arc really didn't enter my lexicon until 2 or 3 years ago, when I personally started really observing everything incoming. I don't know if you guys can hear the helicopter going over. Anyway, I all of a sudden found myself watching TV and saying the word arc over and over again. And now my poor wife has to suffer through it with me. She could really care less, but she's begun to care because she works here now. But yeah, arc is so much. So I want to talk about what an arc is and what it's expected to do at some length in a little while. So continue on. Sorry, I waylaid you there.
No, it's such a good point. I mean, I think that's one of the things I like about writing not to picture is it's kind of just seeing that arc and then just being free around it a little bit. To picture is so interesting. I mean, I would say it feels like there's some more constraints there. You're usually dealing with temp music as well, which I think you speak to any composer is like, people are very opinionated on it, and I understand that if it's a blessing and a curse.
Explain what temp music is, because not everybody watching the show will be experienced enough that they've run into that.
Sure. Okay, so basically what's going to happen if I'm composing for, say, a BBC documentary, I will start getting in little chunks of footage. They'll say, maybe give me a little 2-minute sequence or 5-minute sequence that they're happy with, and they'll usually cut it to music because it gives them an idea of pacing and what they're looking for.
And who's throwing the temp music in? Is it the editor or the director? Who makes the call as to what type of music goes in?
Yeah, can be either. Can be the director or the editor. But you'll find that the busier they get in the production schedule, the director's going to have other things that he needs to do. So as it goes on, he's going to be saying to the editor, and they usually work together. This is like Batman and Robin teams that kind of go around these different productions. So the editor will be left to, find some music to cut to. Now, they might do anything. I mean, the copyright issue doesn't come into play because it's just very much an internal use thing. Right? So they'll be pulling anything from some of their favorite library tracks to, I would get a lot of things from my last documentary off the Interstellar soundtrack, whatever's the latest thing.
Right.
So they'll cut to that music, and that will be called temp music, temporary music. It's not meant to stay on there, but it's meant to give you an idea of what they're looking for.
So are they in fact implying, inferring, or demanding, we want it to sound like Interstellar, or is it more about, is it texturally, we want to be spacious and have that texture, or are they saying kind of emulate that without ripping it off?
Right. It can be any one of those. And I think that the art of it, I've found over the years, is trying to find out what it is they like about it, but more importantly than that, and this is such a, I wish I was told this at the beginning of starting things, trying to figure out sometimes what it is that they don't like about it, because they won't always like everything, and there's certain things that most of the time work. So usually, like the tempo won't be off. It's very unlikely that they're going to want a fast-paced thing and put something slow. So you know that tempo is pretty much going to be spot on. But there'll be other situations where, especially if you think the temp works well, so you do something similar to it with your own style on there, and they're kind of going, it's not working. It's maybe can we change this? And sometimes they won't know. They might not be musical. Won't know what it is that's the problem. And then it might take you weeks to find out that it was the bells. The soundtrack had the little top bells on. You were like, oh, they want magical. They want that little bells. Your ear went for that, but actually what they liked was just the pacing and these big drums under it. That's
interesting.
You see? So it's trying to figure out what they do like and what they don't. Now that doesn't mean at every single cue you go to them and kind of go, can you fill in this questionnaire of what you do? There's no time for that, obviously.
Right.
But if you're hitting a wall...
Get another composer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But if you're hitting a wall, I think it's as productive a conversation to ask them what it is that they don't like about the temp. Will give you so many answers as opposed to what they do like. Both valid questions, but I've just found that is one that people don't ask much.
So, in a given documentary, 90-minute TV doc, let's say, or 2 hours, whatever length of time it is there sort of, I realize some are going to have more music, some are going to have less, but is there sort of an average number of cues that a composer would have to write for a documentary? Is it 10, 20, 50?
So, what's typical for me is the last few I've done have been series, which have been 3 1-hour episodes. Okay. And I've done around 40 minutes for each one.
Wow, that's a lot of music.
Yeah.
Not quite wall to wall, but it's 2/3 of a show.
Yeah, it can be quite a lot. Now, bear in mind, there'll be some reusage within that.
Right.
So you'll write a couple of tracks that they'll really like, say for episode 1. Say you're doing episode 1 and then 2 is going to come hot on its heels and 3. So what will happen is some of those cues from episode 1 will go to the team who are making episode 2, and then they can put some of their favorites onto their show, which is really useful.
It's a little bit of brand, almost sonic branding in a sense. You've written something that they like enough that really gets glued onto the identity of the show, so they carry it throughout.
Right, exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then by the time you get to episode 3, the ideal is that you're getting less temp music because you've written this much stuff for episode 1, you've written a bit more for 2, and now 1 and 2 can go on to 3. So that's
your job does get easier.
Yeah. So as you'll find a lot of composers saying that, it's the first few you're trying to work out thematically what works. You're trying to work out the sound and such like, and so.
That's interesting. Do you ever have conflicts in the early stages? Let's say episode 1, and the director has gotten busy enough that he or she is trusting the editor to put in the temp music, and you're following that cue, no pun intended, following that lead, and you've created stuff that the editor likes. Yeah, the director will like that, and the director hears it, goes, no, this is not at all what I wanted. How do you not have a meltdown because you're going back to the drawing board at that point?
Yeah, there's a story that happened just like this 2 years ago for me. We had a program which was on PBS recently called Wonders of Mexico, and but it came out great, really, really good. But the lady who was the director for the first episode went down a route how she saw her program, and then they have commissioner viewings, so they'll take the program in and the BBC and PBS will watch it late in the day. And we did this really nice, it was about like the forests of Mexico. We did this like very nice nature type of thing, and the commissioners wanted vibrant. They'd sold the BBC had sold the program to PBS on like it's a vibrant Mexico thing, and episode 1 out the blocks was this tender, lovely, nature thing, and she was, she's such a great director. She was so calm about it. She phoned up and she just said, look, we made a great program. We now need to go back and make a different program of the same thing. And I think what you got to remember in that is about being a team player. And of course, there was part of me on the phone that just there was a small part of me that wanted to go, but I've just written like 20 minutes of 40 minutes and we're going to bin off.
Do you get paid to go back and do this new stuff because it wasn't your fault?
No.
Okay, so your workload just doubled for the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think the way to think about it is, whatever a pain in the backside it is for you, and it is a pain in the backside, she's got to go back and make not just changes to the music, she's got to make a change to the like however hard your life is now, her life is harder. And also it is about being a team. It is about being a team player. And and I think I actually in a masochistic way relish those moments, because those are the moments when, without sounding too businessy about it, you're kind of securing your future work or not with that person.
I was gonna go there because now she's gonna say that guy is a team player.
Yeah.
He bailed me out. He didn't come back and ask for more money, and he rose to the occasion. Yeah, you're going to get the call for the next thing that director does.
Right. And they don't forget. But it's like anything, whether it's music or not. Like somebody really helps you out when you're in a jam, you don't forget about that.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, right.
If you're if you're a mensch, somebody,
Yeah.
So you guys have that word over in the UK.
Yeah.
Mensch? Okay.
So sometimes sometimes it happens, and it's certainly not all plain sailing, and it can be tricky. I remember hearing a great Danny Elfman quote that sometimes I think of in those situations, where he said, when he's scoring a film, he said, "I love the beginning bit, when I get a phone call and the world's my oyster and I'm walking down to the grocery store thinking of all the amazing ideas I could do. And I love the end bit when we have the rap party and it's all done and stuff." And he said, and the bit in the middle can just be a struggle, And I'm sure like everybody watching this has experienced those things as well. You can end up with such a piece of music that you're proud of, but to some pieces just come out, and some pieces you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall for days, but they still sound good. I don't necessarily think, it means like every great piece of music has to be written in inspirationally in 3 minutes. Sometimes it's a grind.
I want, speaking of which, I want to start listening to some music, which we will momentarily. But isn't it hard to push down that creative side of yourself where you see the picture, you hear a vision, and you so badly want to do what in your heart, in your mind, and your musical soul will sound great, and it's a better idea in your mind than the vision of the director or the editor might have. How do you train yourself to work for them and not for your musical soul?
Yeah, another good question. I think you develop a relationship with them, and you try and suss out who they are and what the program is as to how much you can take risks with them. So the short answer is sometimes I send 2 cues. Sometimes if I'm watching and I'm like it's rare with these kind of filmmakers that I'll ever look at it and go, "Oh, you've got that completely wrong." Like I kind of will see the angle they're coming from, but a lot of it is point of view. That's what makes something interesting. It's like you could go in. See, you had a drama sequence, right? And you've got 2 characters. You've got so many angles you go musically. You could go in his point of view, her point of view. Something about the surroundings point of view. A lot of, say, the documentaries can be. You could go on an angle of location. Maybe if it's set in a certain place, you might want to thread that in. So, if you really feel that there's an angle that they should be portraying. If you've got time, it's to write 2 cues. Or what I will do is spend a lot of time on what they want, and then just get a 4-bar or 8-bar segment, like a little teaser, and go, and then word the email. So kind of go, okay, I've sort of done what you wanted. That's cool. Just as a curveball, what would you think about going in on this? Do you want that or not? And I'd say don't spend too much time on it.
Right, because you're gambling at that point.
You are gambling. But when you get those right, it's great. I did a documentary about giraffes in Africa, and the director said to me at the beginning, he said, "I don't want any African voices." No idea why. He just was so forthright about it. I didn't want to kind of go, well, why not? But I just went, okay, it's fine. And of course we have one cue and nothing's working. And it was like 3:00 in the morning, and I've got this like kind of voices patch out. I don't know why, like the rebellious schoolboy in me just wanted to, and it worked. And there's this moment of joy that something worked, and the horrible realization that I was going to have to say to him, you know. But I did, you know, it's about your wording then, and just saying to them, and saying,
remember how many people love The Lion King?
Yeah, that's what you want. That's what you want. But, you know, and again, knowing the people you're working with, he was a really nice guy, very open to ideas, and I just kind of went, look, I just saying, you know, maybe.
And he went for it?
He went for it.
Good.
Yeah.
Sign of a good director.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, he worked for the project, not for his own ego.
And I think you've just hit the nail on the head in terms of what you need to do as a composer.
Right.
I think if the decisions that you make and the music that you offer up, you can justify about why it's in the best interest of the story and the project, as opposed to you wanted to get your chops in there, you know, or some ego musical reason, then you're always going to be barking up. They might not accept it, but they'll appreciate it.
You know, we will get to the music momentarily, I promise. But it's not. I think that being a successful composer is not necessarily being brilliance isn't chops. Brilliance is knowing what works best in the scene.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that could literally just be a note. It could just be, you know, a whole note on a piano with lots of reverb, but it texturally fits in the scene. Nobody's going to watch that movie and go, I'm going to, you know, I love that guy's composition, other than guys like us, because I do sit in movie theaters and go, the score is awesome. My wife is like, shut up and listen to the dialogue. They're kissing, you know. But yeah, it's about doing the right thing for the project and the scene at all times. And that's got to be hard, because sometimes you have to push down what is coming out of you like a volcano.
And I tell you what, it's brave to do one or two notes. It's brave, because when you're writing and you're a bit nervous, if it's an early project and you want to just do a great job for them, you just want to do a great job, your inclination is going to be to overproduce, to put too much in. It always is. And the confidence to strip stuff back, I mean, you know, what that'll do for you, it'll let a cue breathe. It will, you know, it will really tear down whether your nugget of an idea was good, because a lot of the time, I've done it myself, you know, I still find myself doing it sometimes. I'm like, if I've got a lot of tracks open for a cue that's not like a titles theme or something that's obviously big, I've got to start asking myself, am I hiding behind the production here? Have I got like a semi-weak idea that I'm trying to, you know, plaster over a little bit?
Or you're being a genius and letting the scene breathe.
Right, and some of the best cues, sometimes I've got 4 tracks, 5 tracks.
You know, if I were a composer, everything would sound like this.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? Yeah.
If we had a scene about loss, it would sound like that. If it were a scene about love, it would sound like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's listen to some music.
Yeah.
The rules of the game here. Oh, yes. Bria's kicking me under the table saying, hold that up. There you go. Subscribe to our channel. Like us. Share it, even if you don't have friends. Share it with strangers. Just share. Sonny and share. And then don't forget to hit that little bell thing up there in the upper right-hand corner, because that will let you know when alerts come out to, you know, like when the next show is coming up. So we don't mention the name of the composer that submitted this stuff. We're going to listen to songs and instrumentals. So we just mentioned the name of the piece.
Okay.
So there you go. We're going to listen. A lot of these are quite long, so we'll probably listen to like 90 seconds of each, and then we'll give some comments and move on to the next one. Then we'll come back and chit-chat some more. So first one we're going to listen to is called In Your Eyes.
You see the cape, you see the mask, you build me up to more than just a man. can be what I see in your eyes, in your eyes. You need to be strong, you need to be brave, and here I hide behind the mask and shield. Still I fly, imagining I can be what I see in your eyes, in your eyes. The longer I remain upon a pedestal, the harder to be true. The higher that I fly into our fantasy, the further I fly from you. When the cape is torn, when the mask falls off, when the shield is dropped, reveal.
And yes, Jimmy Carvalho, this is a new mic, but it just shows how long it's been since you've watched the show, because we've had this mic for about 3 months, dude. That's cool. That's cool. At least you showed up today. So what'd you think?
I like it. I wrote a few things down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us what you wrote down.
I feel bad as well because I feel like should I look at you guys? Do I look at my? I'm just going to look anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere.
All over
It's
the
fine.
place. So
You can look at them, you can look at them. It's all
right?
good.
Too many things to look at. I liked it. I think there's some really nice production in there as well. I think the vocals recorded really nicely. I love that percussion coming in the second verse.
Mm-hmm.
Really understated. And the BV's second verse are nice. The cello sounds lovely. It breathes really well. I wonder if it might be worth, and this is so an icing on the cake thing, it might be worth considering blending a really nice intimate female vocal in at some points in that, because I think that his voice and a breathy female voice,
right,
just in the odd phrase would just give you little chills.
I think that's a great idea.
You know,
I like it. The producer in me likes that a lot.
And I think the lyrics would lend itself to that if you cherry pick those moments.
Yep.
To emphasize a
right,
lyric.
and don't go crazy. Like too much of a good thing could be too much of a good thing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it might be worth I would be tempted to get someone who had that voice, get them to record the whole song, and then sit and chop it up afterwards, perhaps, and try and figure out which bits work. But I think that would, it's lovely as it is, but I think it might just give you that little.
You know, many years ago, Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees and Barbra Streisand did a project, and that's what they did, was they recorded both of them all the way through.
Right.
Could you imagine having to call Barbra Streisand back in the control room to go, okay, now we only brought you in on the third line of the verse for this one.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Right.
All right, well, that was called In Your Eyes. Excellent job. Let's
good.
move on now to an instrumental. Let's listen to one called Enchanted Garden.
You want to go or should I go?
You should go. You're the guest.
Okay.
First of all, I'm super polite, but second of all, I'm more interested in what you've got to say. I made some notes in this one. I want to see if your thoughts line up with mine, just for my own ego.
Yeah. Again, I thought it was nice. I think I like the genre. I think it's really usable because it reminds me of that when the bells and stuff come in. It takes me to that like kind of almost Tim Burton-esque Edward Scissorhands type things. I mean, perhaps it would need to be a little bit more minor for that. Not saying that it should be, but for that usage. But that the amount of time, especially I get in documentaries, so many people are like, kind of, oh, can we have that Tim Burton? Can we have that like magical? So I mean, that vibe was really nailed. And what I'm about to say takes into account that I thought overall it was really nice. I think that maybe if we go back to the beginning on those nice string swells where they come up and down, I would milk even more of those. I would take that velocity down to almost nothing each time, because it kind of what we on like 127 usually on volume and stuff. It felt like it was working in the range of about 40 to 127. So we're saying if we was going 0 to 127, 0 nothing on 127 the volume. Okay. I should have done that out of 100. Why didn't I do it out of 100? Let's say percentages. Right. Start again.
Okay.
So say the strings felt like they were going from 30% volume to like 80% volume. And what I'm saying is take it down to like barely anything. Would be really nice to have those moments.
They didn't sound all that realistic, probably because the velocity didn't mimic what real players would do.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I think that would help. I also think before the piano comes in at that section, I'll be tempted to really give it a slight like rubato feel, to be like kind of that. What I mean by that like kind of almost out of time. It felt like it was done to click, which was okay and it worked. I would love to hear what it would be like if that was kind of just done free and allowed to breathe just a little at the end of each one of those swells and just give it that maybe a little bit of extra magic. The only other thing I'd say as well is I think when the piano comes in first and it's very quiet and soft, again, I felt like it was played in a little bit loudly, and you'll get a different sound out of the piano, even if it's samples, if you're barely touching it, and then crank that volume up. And I think that, again, it's a great piece, but just to give it that extra little bit of magic, if it would play, again, this is a real Hans Zimmer technique rip-off thing to do, is he loves playing so many instruments at the softest level, and then cranking that up. And I'm a big fan personally of that effect anyway, but I mean in this I think it'd be super appropriate, super quiet.
I thought compositionally the composer, like, wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
And it I could think of plenty of uses for it. I had the same feeling though that it was 15% off the mark just because the execution just needed to be taken up a notch, and the suggestions you're making are great. I will give it big props on the title. Secret Garden. This absolutely sounded like a secret garden.
Is it Enchanted Garden?
Or Enchanted Garden, yeah.
Yeah, great title. Perfect.
Yeah, and let's talk about titles for a minute because you own a library. I'm always making the point that if an editor is given a bin full of music in the context, let's say, of a reality show, and they've got two people that are walking on a beach together having a little romantic moment, and one piece is called Zany's Tune, and the next piece is called Friday Afternoon, and the next piece is called Hand in Hand, and the next piece is called Love at First Beach. That's the one you're going to go for because it's telling you what you should be hearing. So I think the fact that this was called Enchanted Garden, I kind of knew what it was going to sound like. Not exactly, of course, but you knew the ballpark it was going to be in. So this would get chosen, or at least have a shot at being one of the finalists, just because of the title.
Yeah, and we'll go into maybe this after the some more of these tracks. But when I was spending the year or two getting the Music for Income course together, and I interviewed 3 like award-winning editors. And these guys like top of their game, and all 3 of them, the importance of titles it was crazy. They're flipping down these lists so quick, pages and pages and pages in music libraries, and it's all the title that's going to get you clicked on or not clicked on. And the beauty with titles is you can reverse engineer them, of course, is you don't need to have the title and write. You can write and then pick the title. But yeah, Enchanted Garden, perfect title. And if someone was looking for Enchanted Garden, they'd be very happy with what they got with that.
Absolutely. I had a thumbs down on the mix. Not that it was horrible, but it didn't really come together. It's like the components were there. And I think that altering the velocity and stuff and using the things that you suggested, it's not necessarily a case of fader up or fader down. It was more about the way it was played, the textural aspects of it. It just felt like it was 15% off. But overall, a really good piece.
Yeah, really good. And something I wrote, it was compression ? On here, because I think that there was a
piano.
There was some compression on the piano, and I don't think there was any need for it, because I think the piece was so nice, and the piano you wanted to get maximum emotion out of the piano, not punch out of the piano.
Yeah, it's on Elton John record.
Right. But it's a really interesting point, because I think for so many of us, compression becomes a go-to. And if you're doing an orchestral thing like this, I think, again, great piece, and it just could have that extra 10-15% by taking that compression off and really letting it grow.
I used to record. I was really good at three things as an engineer. I don't know if you even know, but I used to be an engineer and worked at fairly high levels, and also had the privilege to do orchestral stuff, rock stuff, and weird stuff like a record for. I've done some jazz, but some guys playing Middle Eastern music. I did a full album with them once. So I had a broad range of experiences as an engineer. And one of the things that I suggest to people that are using pianos in a box, as I affectionately call them, is they sound really good. You listen to it and go, wow, that sounds like a Steinway. It sounds like a Bosendorfer. But they still sound like they're coming down a wire to me. And I've suggested to people that they play them into a pair of monitors out in a room and re-mic them from a few feet away to add the air back in. Now, I'm sure that the engineers who are recording this beautiful, 9-foot Bosendorfer know to take a microphone and back it off the strings. Of course, it depends on the type of sound they're going for, the octave and all that stuff. But more often than not, when I hear a piano that is coming from a sample library, I just want some air in the room. So try that. You'll like it.
Definitely.
And this was a case of piano that could have used that.
I agree.
Okay, let us listen to a song now. This one's called Beyond the Horizon.
Moving on, coming down, letting go, moving out. Seasons change around the sun. Some lessons go better unlearned. There's a place on the horizon we can stay. We could find it, place for you and me, the ground beneath our feet, just beyond everything we've known. There's a place we can find it, hand in hand into the great unknown. Taking in familiar ways, one more breeze, one more day. Taking with memories, the time we spent, the things we couldn't say. There's a place on the horizon we could stay. We could find it, a place for you and me, the ground beneath our feet, just beyond everything we know. There's a place we could find.
right, that was Beyond the Horizon. And what say you, Mr. Kruk?
I'm really impressed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
After all these years of getting music from our members, it was shocking you something good came through?
I loved it. I really liked it. I tell you what, I had my music for TV hat on when I was listening to it. So other than just liking it as a song, the things that I think music supervisors are going to like about that, I think the lyric could be really useful for TV stuff, and work very well. I think that the space in the melody I really liked as well. I think the voice was spot on for the track.
Yeah.
That's so hard sometimes, right? I mean, finding the right... I mean, I'm sure you've had situations where you've got vocalists in who were like really great, but if it's not right for the track...
And especially working as a solo composer or songwriter, working out of a home studio. You know, back in my day, I was at Westlake Studios in Hollywood the other day. I had the privilege of sitting at the console, well, not the console that Michael Jackson's Thriller was recorded on, but in the actual control room and the studio where they recorded Thriller and a bunch of other Michael Jackson stuff. And I was talking to them about when you're in a facility like that with multiple rooms and all these different producers and engineers and musicians all milling about, you become friends and you trade ideas and you bounce ideas off of each other. Whereas most of the folks watching the show and our members are largely isolated. So if you don't like the sound of your vocal texture on a song, you're a little bit screwed. I mean, you can use other taxi members if you've networked well and stuff, but you're at somewhat of a disadvantage. So this person either chose the right vocalist or was the right vocalist. I agree.
Yeah.
Really spot on, as you say.
Isn't it? It glued. And it's so lovely when that happens, right? The track and the vocal just fit each other perfectly. For me, it's subjective, but it had that slight Ed Sheeran, something Ed Sheeran going on there. And obviously, like, if something sounds a bit Ed Sheeran, it's going to be in your favour, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, as long as it's not too Ed Sheeran.
Sure.
Right, just enough to make, I completely agree.
So, yeah, I mean, I was very impressed. What do you think?
I everything you said I agree with. The only thought that I had of anything I would change was it sounded like it needed the introduction of another instrument in the second verse when it came in. I would have waited like 4 bars or something and just brought a hint of something else in. Could have been a double on the guitar, could have been a cello, but the cello would have been cliche, but it would have been appropriate at the same time. There was this thing in the background, really faint, which good on you for keeping it that low. And I was wondering, I used to love doing, my era in the studio was before we had any samples. So everything had to be done by hand. And we would take a table like this and put 10 people at it with drumsticks to get a sound, or people walking on a floor. And that sounded to me like a pair of foam rubber flip-flops just being just gently tapped on the surface, and it works so beautifully.
Yeah, it really does. And I think especially for those kind of things, and if for anybody, I would say as well, who's not got into this, I've found a little trick in my back pocket that I love so much is found percussion. And you can get really nice sample packs of found percussion now, and it's so interesting. And they'll have weird stuff in there, like some completely unusable things, like someone's like taking a sample of the Xerox, copy or something, and you'll just be like, when am I ever going to use that? But there's some sounds that just with a little bit of reverb and a little bit, and because we kind of like, I didn't know what that was.
Yeah,
in the
I
background.
didn't.
No, but
I was sitting here trying really hard to figure it out, and I couldn't.
But it was really nice for the track, and so kudos for that. But I think if anyone who wants to get those kind of things going on, checking out some found percussion stuff can be really interesting. It just gives your track this interesting backdrop, but it doesn't, this is what I think is great about it, doesn't push it in any cliche direction, because people can't really identify what it is they're hearing. It's just interesting.
I always tell people they want more of the same. The industry tends to want more of the same, but a little bit different, and push the envelope by a factor of 10 or 15%, and you'll be different enough. If you're too different, then you're too different to use. And if you're too much the same, well, we've been there, we've done it, we've heard it. So that was a really good execution of adding something in that made it 10 or 15% different.
And the level in the mix, like you say, so nice, just
perfect,
just right.
I can't say enough good stuff about the level that was at. Let's listen to another instrumental one. This one is called. Oh, here's a good example of a title that you should never submit to a library or anybody. The title is FB3-1 Happy Dancing Feet. Happy Dancing Feet, that's a title. FB3-1, not a good way to title something when you send it off to the industry. That said, let's listen to the music. Really quick on the draw, wasn't I? All right, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I'm interested in what the brief is, or the genre in this one, and my assumption would be like a kind of playful, almost kids TV thing. I guess.
I don't know. Well, now that you're spending a lot of time here in the States, and maybe you guys have the show in the UK as well, but all these shows about kittens and puppies, I forget what it's called, but this would be great for kittens chasing a ball of yarn,
right.
you know.
Right.
But I don't know. What do you... happy. Emotionally upbeat. I mean, those are all descriptors, but what is the genre?
Yeah. But I mean, nice. I could see it on that, kind of fun, frivolous fun, family viewing kind of thing, right?
America's Funniest Videos,
Yeah.
Kid in the backyard whacking his dad in the crotch with a wiffle bat. This would be perfect for that.
There's a lot of that.
Comedic. Yeah. We really need, yes, Americans apparently need, I won't even get it. I won't go there. Somebody will be offended if I say it. So there you go. I've saved you from being offended today. The synth part, the thing in the beginning was a little like off-putting. It was, the part was okay, and the sound wasn't even so bad, but the level it was at was just like jarring.
Yeah, it was quite full on, wasn't it?
Yes.
I like the little hook. I still remember it. The dun 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 dun. I've still got that in my head. That's a good thing. I liked putting stops in for usage. Like if editors are cutting with it, that's going to be useful to them. I don't know if it needed as many as it did, but I think putting a few in is definitely. I mean, that's just again, if it's a library angle, I think having stops is so useful for editors. They love it because they can just pop that in there. I did think that maybe there could be a little bit of more light and shade in some sections, maybe dropping it down a little bit so that there's almost a sound bed under dialogue,
right,
part to it. Again, this is personal thing. I kind of think that it's a great track. It would be great to just take some of those lead instruments off and just have it rumbling away for a bit, so that you could easily have someone talking over it and then bringing it.
When it came into the second half, it had more bottom end on it. Excuse me, I had the same thought where I would have introduced just maybe the kick, bass, and snare, or maybe kick, bass, snare, and some sort of pad for the first 8 bars of that. Because you're right, that could have easily been looped. At this year's Road Rally, we've got a woman who last year just knocked it so far out of the park. She's what I would call a AAA rated video editor. Mostly does reality shows, certainly capable of doing much more. And she started out in the industry as a story editor, so she sees her editing job as moving the story forward very much so, and treats music that way. And she made that point last year's presentation. I'm bringing her back this year to start the entire weekend because she was so good. And she talks about sometimes it's best to just get out of the way. And we're talking about stems, I believe. And she said sometimes the most useful stems are the ones with the least stuff in them.
Yeah,
and that would a classic case of that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I mean, there's enough usable, repeatable material going on there to have a section that's very different. I think that there was points where I'm trying to say I don't think it needed to repeat itself again, because an editor could take that and loop it, and that would be fine. So yeah, the need for some contrast for me in there would have been really useful.
That's one of the reasons I'm having her start out the entire weekend at the rally this year, is because if people understand how editors work and how they think, that will inform how composers compose, because you're talking like a very experienced composer now, realizing that you don't need to have 8 or 16 bars of something that could very well be 4 bars and just be looped by the editor. You're thinking from their seat.
Yeah, and that's in large part, like saying, interviewing those editors for the course. I mean, I knew that it was important, but when I was just hearing them say in the interviews about how it's all about options for them. It's all about trying to build that scene and exactly what you're saying. That if that starts driving your composition process, you're winning.
Yeah,
straight away.
Because nobody else knows it. As a matter of fact, Bria, can you post the link to the course again? Because I did actually watch one of the segments that had an editor, and I remember thinking, yes, this is so awesome, because when you put yourself in the shoes of the end user, you're going to create music that's more usable by the end user.
Right. I'll tell you something, just a quick tangent that I found out of all of them that was really interesting as well, was that they'll, like we said, look at the title, they'll go in, they'll play the first few bits of it, and then the next thing they will jump to immediately, the end.
Yeah, because they want to see if the end resolves in a way that's usable for them. And then they'll go back and they'll actually scan the waveform, looking to see if, like, the middle section is bigger looking. Then they'll scoot up to that and go, okay, I want to come in with the drum turnaround at the beginning to bring it in, and then smack into the big stuff, and then resolve to the button ending or the stinger, and we're out.
Exactly. Yeah. And that whole thing about a lot of library tracks, like we said, having gaps. What was really useful about this Dancing Feet track was those gaps that we put in, is that if you can have a track where there's a stop in the middle that is different to the end, and there's a little bit of daylight, you've just given them 2 endings.
That's a great point.
In one track.
Yeah.
Right? And so if they don't happen to like that ending, you can use that ending. The only thing I would say, and there's something as well that came out of the course thing, is, and this is a bone of contention, but I would argue, if you're writing for library, don't use key changes.
Right.
Because you're screwing up the end.
Yeah, you can't edit stuff from the second half to the first half because you're an octave off.
Right.
Let's talk about edit points for a minute, or as you call them, stops. We actually mentioned that a lot of our listings will say, having great edit points is a plus or something to that effect. Some people take that very literally to mean that there should be, like, a whole beat rest there, some daylight. And so they will overuse those stops, and a lot of daylight will show up. How do you know what the balance is as a composer? Should my edit points just be, a kick drum that's pretty obvious and easy to cut on? How often would you, as a composer writing for libraries, advise having full stops in there with like a whole note rest or something?
Some of it's genre dependent. I think. I mean, like the trailer formula would nearly always put some clear air into the middle of it, right? How many times you go and see trailers and it stops and then it just all kicks off afterwards, right? So if it was that, yeah, I probably would stick that in the whole time. I mean, like much as we said, to go back to that thing we said about two endings. Okay, so if you were looking at it like that, yes, I guess it would be useful to have the nothing going on there at all. But that's not the only way to do it. And if sometimes if you're bridging that gap, or you've just got like a nice little, sometimes I'll just go to like a sustained string note after an end, and that just gives them something. Now, again, that gives you an option that the end doesn't give you. So there are different ways, I think, to do it. But certainly you're right. Like, it doesn't have to be formulaic. It's just, I think, if your thinking is coming from a place of providing options, and a lot of libraries nowadays are working with stems anyway. So, there's room for editors to get in there even more and cut. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And an observation I've made is that probably 60% of editors are musicians of varying levels. 40% aren't musicians, and they don't speak the vernacular. They don't use the lexicon of music, so they can't say, I really should find something with a bunch of minor stuff in it because that connotates sadness or depression or whatever. They just think in terms, I need something sad. So it's, I don't know where I was going with that, other than to say that the people who are using your music won't always think in musical terms. They'll think in emotion, or what they need, almost utilitarian, what they needed to accomplish. So if you as a composer can second guess them and get that in there, whether they can think in musical terms or not, you're ahead of the game.
For sure.
And I'm really liking those fingers today. All right, let's listen to a song, and this one is called We're Friends.
Feel blue when you haven't been around. I'll check on you too.
Go ahead. Finish the thought.
Like, oh, that's not writing.
I've got a question for you. If somebody put out a brief that said we're looking for something in a Jack Johnson vibe, clearly this is in a Jack Johnson vibe, is it too close? Just close enough? Where's that line of...
What a great question. What a great question. I'm going to be completely honest and say I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, Jack Johnson, Jason Mraz, that kind of thing. If it was me, if I was on a show and I needed those kind of tracks, I would take that one.
It doesn't rip off any of their songs.
No.
It's definitely in the style or vibe of. The vocal approach is very much like both those gents. So yeah, I would probably... It's one of those songs that if you heard it, if you're sitting in a theater and you hear it, you're going to go, I don't remember that Jack Johnson song ever being on the radio.
Right.
Right. It sounds like it should have been.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
I liked it a lot. I always think, is that a British voice? I was sitting there going, is that a British folk? That's just an aside. I'm like, yeah, British voice.
We can't tell over here.
Right,
just so you know.
I couldn't tell the bits. I was like, oh, maybe it's not. There's a lot of things I like about it. Like you say, I think the vibe's spot on. Again, I think it's another example of where the vocal meets the genre really nicely.
Perfectly.
Yeah, and that's just so hard to do, and nailed it. Okay, so a couple of points, and again, subjective, because I like the piece a lot. So I would really love to hear what it's like if, for the first verse, up until the vocal, I've written down the vocal when we mix it up, which I think was like the just before the chorus, something like that. If it would have just started with the uke or whatever was going on there, because we had the little tiny strummy guitar, and then we had another guitar underneath, which is really nice production-wise. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if it would have been nice to just be brave, take that second guitar out, go for that real Hawaiian sparse vocal, the little percussion going on, and just that one guitar, and then bring the second guitar in as another layer later on. So again, you've got this concept of building happening.
The ark.
Yeah, the ark again, right?
And we're not talking Noah's Ark.
Right. And I just feel that, I think if the track works, which I think it would, with that pulled out, it would still sound great and would breathe even more from the beginning. Brilliant. And it gives you another gear shift to go in just before you get to that chorus. Also, after that breakdown where the drums came back in, oh, what a nice moment. I'm such a big fan of drums coming in a slightly unusual place. It just came back in with the vocal. I can't remember where it was now, but I remember writing down, it just wasn't what I was expecting, and it just really nice.
I had a different drum epiphany coming probably, I don't remember where it was, many years ago, like 35 years ago. I had the privilege of working with Eric Clapton when he discovered two guys on the beach behind his house in the Bahamas named Tom and Don, and he brought them to the studio, and he was co-producing with Tom Dowd, one of the famous producers of the day. And they had a song, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, everybody went to lunch, and Tommy Dowd, who's one of the 5 greatest, maybe one of the 3 greatest record producers in history, said to me, do you want to learn how to take a good song and make it a great song with nobody here but your hands and yourself? I said, yeah, sure. He said, okay, here's what we're going to do. There was a drum turn. There was a 4-count drum roll. He said, that is coming out of the bridge going into the last chorus. He said the song would capture your attention much quicker if that were at the very front. We started the song with that. So I want you to roll down there, grab it from out of there, and move it up to the head of the song. I immediately started sweating bullets, like the movie Airplane with the pilot.
Yeah.
I mean, literally just like sweating bullets. My hands are shaking. I'm like, rocking the tape back and forth over the head. He's like, come on already. You can always put it back together if you screw it up. Right. But I finally successfully moved that drum turn to the beginning of the song, and it went from being a pretty good song to an incredibly good song because of that thing that he noticed. There was a spot in here where I had the same thought, where the drum turn should be moved. It would be more effective there than it was there.
Right.
Anyway, so we both picked up on the drums, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Hello. Oh,
It's Jack Johnson.
No.
Jack Johnson's lawyers.
It's one of my sisters, and I thought that I had turned my phone off. I had not. Anyway. Hello, Wendy.
But yeah, no, I mean, I thought great. I think my big takeout with that, and I really, really liked it, is just I would like to hear a really sparse beginning where it was just very chilled out, and then bring in those secondary guitars in as layers later on. I think give it a little bit of magic.
He brought the whole gang to the party too soon.
Maybe a little.
Yeah. That was pretty darn cool. I had a question that I'd written down before you actually came to the show today, which is something I saw on your website, Insider Tips Directly Through. What is it that editors always look for when choosing tracks for film and TV?
Wow.
Or was that a range of things? I mean, I saw this on your website and I went, okay, I can think of about 5 of them, and we've probably talked about most of them. Is there something else that editors look for that we haven't mentioned today that's like some secret?
So from what I found when I was interviewing them was track title, which we'd covered, was super important. They're then going to try the beginning. They're going to go straight to the end and check that works. Like you said, waveform is going to be super important, and a lot of them liked that, talking about having a little bit of an edit point, in the track, so that waveform, how we're going this way, kind of goes up and almost has a little bit of a dip and then off again. So that arc side of it, and there was also things about alternate versions and trying to make sure that they have options there. There's a really, really good point that David, one of the editors I interviewed, spoke about voiceover, and it's just some really interesting considerations. This isn't now an essential thing, but it was the concept of knowing the frequencies of the typical male or female, range. And there's I put up on the website. There's some free lessons that you can get just by typing in your email. You get these 3 free lessons from the course, and in the first lesson you'll hear him talk about this. And just trying to experiment with leaving a gap in that frequency range. And so you're kind of going above, experimenting with instruments above it and instruments below it, and it's really interesting. You'd be surprised. The track, when I was experimenting with it, I was like, it doesn't actually sound like it's lacking. Like you'd assume, oh well, hang on, there's this big pocket of mid-range here when nothing's going on. Not necessarily. And I would say that an interesting thing to do if you're writing for some TV shows that are going to have voiceover on them in terms of library music, sometimes it's not a bad idea to just have an audio track of a male voice speaking and a female voice speaking, and just dropping it into your tracks and just see how it sits. And is there an instrument that's clashing? Because if you've got like a guitar that's clashing, just try something else, or try something in the higher register or a lower register or whatever, And it's the same thing they talk about with melodic ideas, of just being a little careful with melody. They sometimes like melodic options, but melody can be dangerous, especially if done in a long form. So I would say again, if you're writing library music, personally, I think like short melodic ideas are more adaptable, let's say, than longer ones. Doesn't mean longer one couldn't work, but I just think you're giving them more options to get it out quickly. Otherwise, they're trying to get rid of your melody in the middle of a phrase. And again, we're going back to editors, right?
Especially if it's a legato melody and you just can't cut in the middle of it without it sounding stupid. It makes the edit more obvious, way more obvious. I have a friend named Hookman who is a hit songwriter, hit producer, and he's famous for writing great hooks. And we were at some convention, I think the Hawaii Songwriters thing 2 or 3 years ago, and they had songwriters playing songs of theirs that ended up getting cut and became hits. And one of his songs, I can't remember, he wrote it for somebody, it could have been Beyonce, somebody really big. And whoever that artist is, female artist, she passed on it. And he was just devastated. It's like, why did she pass on it? And then somebody else said to him, it's just the song's not in the right key. It's a happy song, but the key is too low to be happy. And so he actually changed the key of the song, and the next artist they played it for, it's like, I want that on my record. And when he played them back to back in the room, it was so obvious that just changing the key, taking it up a third or a fifth or whatever it was like, wow, that just made that thing so much more usable. So I would posit that the same thing is true for library tracks. Think about if your whole thing is like, in a middle octave in the key of A, and that happens to be in that frequency range that voices are in, just drop it down.
And it doesn't mean, of course, that you can't write anything that on
Right.
an EQ spectrum goes into that, like, obviously. But I mean, I think it's about activity as well. Mm-hmm. So, if something's going to grab the ear because it's got a little percussive thing, or it's just ear catching, having ear catching stuff in the frequency ranges of voiceover is a little dangerous. Maybe you want to put that somewhere else. Or the concept of drones. So many music libraries love tracks that've got some kind of drone as part of its background, and so go high with your drone or go low with your drone, or
right.
go home. No, but or go. But again, maybe just be careful to keep it out of the activity range of voiceovers.
The Vice TV shows and the Viceland network have done so much for drones because they use them so well in so many of their shows, and a lot of them are just basically almost atonal. It's just like one note that just lays there, but it's almost like room tone, like an air conditioner or the motor of a car running or something. It's just enough to fill the background in a way that doesn't conflict and adds a certain level of makes you sweat a little bit. Mm-hmm. I love drones.
Yeah, me too.
I'm a big drone fan. Okay, let us listen to an instrumental. This one is called Canyonlands. Audience loved it. What you think?
I really like the vibe. I like again, straight away we know what it is coming out of the traps is great. And I think that's really good.
Good title, by the way.
Good title, definitely. I tell you what was great, that I can't work out whether it's a whistle or a voice. At one point I was like, is that a whistle? Is that? But I don't mind not knowing. It was great that kind of was very like Ennio Morricone thing going through.
Definitely. I don't want to call it a ripoff, but it was certainly inspired by his sound.
Yeah, for sure. So I think with this is great. I think it can be really, really, really good. with just some tinkering with the layers of things. Again, it was another track for me that kind of gave away the goods quite too soon at the beginning. And if we go back to put our editor hats on, I as an editor want more options. If I was sitting there from an editor perspective, I'd be sitting there like, okay, I got it, I love the vibe, it's cool, and I got more of the same, but I couldn't get my fingers into the mud and chop it up and get loads of elements out of it unless I went to the stems and did it myself, and I haven't got that much time because I'm busy in an edit suite, so I'm probably going to go on to the next thing.
Time is of the essence, absolutely.
Right? So for me, I would say maybe going back to that and just construct it, like build it, add the layers. There's enough layers in there to get something going on with the guitars. Hold back the nice whistle voice thing that I really liked is so nice and so vibey and effective. Make me wait for it a little bit.
Yeah. It was pretty pervasive. It was there all the time almost. And going back to your point about I won't say it. That was an ungentlemanlike way to say this, but the kick and the bass were really well. The relationship between them was near perfect, if not perfect, and that would be a great example of boom, 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 boom. That would have been that section you're looking for. That was like a piece, a stem that would have been very usable. I'm trying to think of it, but yeah, it was basically, okay, all faders up almost from the beginning and just let it ride.
Yeah.
And it didn't have an arc.
Right.
It didn't have an arc as far as the arrangement of the writing. It didn't have an arc as far as the arrangement of the production, but the basic piece was there. So you're right. It wouldn't take a lot to take it from good to great.
Yeah, and I mean, that's such a great point you make. So if we get just the drums and the bass together. Now, again, if you're an editor and that track's building up, let's say, we've got the shot of like the of the desert, and we've got the hill, and out of the haze has come as the cowboy, and all this kind of thing. Now that bass and drums, I might eke out 20 seconds before I need the other stuff. That's a nice chunk of 20 seconds performing royalty. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
because you're giving the ability to stretch that track out for as long as possible, which you want, and obviously for the editor it's adaptable too. So. But it's great. There's so many ingredients in there that I think you can just build those layers up, and it'd be great. And then build. It's almost we came in at 75% point or something like that, and then really hit it off with the whistle or voice. Sorry, my ears don't know which one it is, but I kind of like that I don't know which one it is. And then you've got something special in there. You've really got something that gives editors loads of options. So I think it's that track has got the potential to be really, really awesome with a little bit of...
Not for nothing, it's a little bit of a tangent, but there's a new show that I think premiered in June on the Paramount Network, and it's called Yellowstone with Kevin Costner.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically Kevin Costner in Dallas. It's a family drama set on the biggest ranch in the state of Montana. And the acting is good, the story is good. There's a lot of like, holy crap, I can't believe they did that moments. And it's really interesting to watch how they use music in a Western, but in a today setting.
Right.
It was, I actually didn't see who the music soup was on it, but I remember thinking, good challenge, because you want to be authentic to the Western. The Western theme is so intense in the whole show. I mean, it's just all about being in Montana, being a cowboy. They actually go out and herd cows, and they have fist fights in the barnyard, all that stuff. But it's today. Then they get in their $30,000 pickup truck and drive away, which they didn't do back in the day.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I think as well what you can do with those two. I did another BBC documentary actually about the Wild West, and I had a lot of fun. Because one of the producers on the show gave me access to this sound library. They had this BBC sound library of Wild West sounds. and of course, like the first thing I'm thinking because he's like, wouldn't it, but he's a really, really sweet guy, I love this guy so much, but he was like, wouldn't it be great if we could incorporate some Wild West sounds in? So I'm like, okay, and you start playing with them. First of all, like you've got like
the whip crack,
the whip crack, and you listen to it after a while and you're like, this is so cliche. But what I ended up doing, which I was really happy with the result of, is if you can mesh them together, almost like we were talking that found percussion thing we said like about 30 minutes ago, where your ear can't quite distinguish what's going on. If you can get those sounds and you can affect them, so like maybe filter them, frequency wise,
combine the whip crack with a cymbal and put it where the cymbal would be.
Exactly, and do it in such a way that it's not an in-your-face audience knows it's a whip crack, because obviously then you're going to sound design and you're in really dangerous territory, because they're like, if we want a whip crack, we'll put one in, thank you very much. We don't want you to do it from the music. But if you blend it, like you said, now you get this really interesting back notes of something Western.
It's changing it 10 or 15%.
Right. And maybe that, like you say, on the little drums and bass thing, if that was used effectively, and it's dangerous. I mean, it's like adding cayenne pepper, to you don't want to put too much of that in there, you just ruin everything. But that might just be another little idea.
I love it. I'm enjoying having you as a guest on the show.
I'm loving this.
Let's listen to a song. This one is called Emerald Eyes.
Sun is shining through her auburn hair. Her eyes are emerald green. We're walking miles so we can get there. Yeah, she looks a lot like me. Wandering gypsies that follow a sign. She'll drink watermelon, I'll have one. Can you recommend a place to lay our head, just to rest a while so we can travel again? Traveling down this lonesome highway, it can be a long, long road. When I feel the headlights on things, I squint to hide my tears. Emerald eyes look out beside me. Her smile takes away my fear. She squeezes my hand tightly. They say the doctors in the town were headed.
I've got to say, when this one started out, I thought, wow, continuing on this kind of country-esque Western theme with Stevie Nicks joining the band.
Yeah. I love the production on this, right? The instruments, just really, nicely recorded. Really nicely recorded. And the parts, I don't know who's produced it, but they've just done a lovely job on that.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, I can't say.
You can't say.
Yeah.
But whoever you are, well done. Like that.
Mystery guest.
Just radio ready, as far as I'm concerned. I thought it was great. And a couple of little touches that I really enjoyed. What I thought was particularly effective in the chorus, the way that the tambourine and the banjo went into double time.
Yeah.
but nothing else did.
Yep.
And it just gave you this nice feeling of, something's bubbling.
I
And,
had the same exact thought. It's like, wow, good move. You
Yeah.
know, it was noticeable but not obtrusive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Really, really nice. So I loved all that. I can't make my mind up in terms of the fit with the vocal and the song. I like her voice and I like the song, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but for me it wasn't as much of a gel as the other couple of songs that we heard. But again, really subjective. That's just a mic a take on it as opposed to any definite thing.
I was influenced by the fact that she sounded so much like Stevie Nicks that I was expecting, well, if the vocal sounds that much like her, then the rest of the record should sound like her. And it really was more like an early Eagles, like Desperado era Eagles thing. And then somewhere in the lyric it had Gypsy in there, and I went, okay, clearly this person is a Stevie Nicks fan. But make up your mind. You're the Eagles, you're Stevie Nicks, but again, being overly subjective and probably too critical. The average listener or an editor trying to place us in something is never going to give it the amount of analysis that we are.
Yeah. And listen, I tell you what a compliment that what we're sitting here and debating is like some kind of subjective, like what I'm kind of saying is, would I, if I was hearing it on the radio and what I think, but I've not got anything else to say really about
that
it.
dress looks stunning on her, but the sequins might look better in purple.
Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, what a great point that we're sitting here talking about subjective stuff that is just that. It's just subjective.
Yep. So take it in the spirit which it has been given, which is we liked it.
Good job.
Let's listen now to an instrumental called Deeply Inspired. Yet another good title. There's the track. Interesting.
I like the carefree, playful vibe again. So I'm putting my music library hat on, and I'm thinking if I was sat here and this track came in from Taxi, so I would be thinking about towards a kids application. Mm-hmm. For me personally, that's where my head would be with that. Let's talk about MIDI sounds and stuff and samples a little bit. So there are certain genres where I think lend themselves a little bit more to not worrying too much about live instruments, and one of those you could argue is like kids TV. That's part of its sound and its charm, you could argue. I think though that in this I would have liked some live elements in there, and then perhaps other parts could have worked around it, and also I think this is an example of it sounded quite quantized, a lot of the parts, the percussion and the guitars and stuff, so I think for a start maybe experiment with no quantize if you're brave, or you should find on most DAWs you've got a quantize setting, right? And I think there's a lot of composers don't think to use that. It's either like we're quantized to the grid,
right,
or we're freehand, but changing that down to about 70 or 80% can be interesting as well sometimes. So I would say for me it was quite heavily quantized, and maybe get some live instruments in there as well. The guitar, I would like to hear perhaps a live guitar, and loosen up some quantizing, especially on the shaker and stuff, and then maybe just let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah, just one live instrument that is played by hand on top of stuff that's obviously quantized really goes a long way to solve that problem. Yeah. At the end, I got to admit, and please don't be offended by this, but I wasn't loving that track. I'm going, okay, you know what? Actually, the honest thought that I had was, this person is well on their way to getting it right, but they're finding their feet. Yes. When I heard that track. And then when it got to the end, I turned to you and went, no, there's the track. All of a sudden, when it was all stripped down and had some more room to breathe, that felt like the track that it should have been. There was just too much. There was 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag in the beginning.
Right.
And at the end, it was like, oh, that works. And it was, at 90% right versus 50% right in the beginning.
Yeah.
Just an observation.
Yeah. Also, I'd be interested in a version of it that had a kind of chilled approach to it, because you've got that little dun, 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 and it'd be interesting to hear that on guitar with just like a live shaker in there on just like eighths or something, and hear a version of it done in that way. I mean, it might not work. It might ruin the vibe that there is completely, but that would be another interesting angle. But definitely get some live instruments in there, for me personally, I think.
We're actually, believe it or not, the show was over 3 minutes ago, but we are still broadcasting. This is going by so quickly. Do you have anything that you want to talk about that we haven't touched on? And while you're thinking about that, Bria, can you post a link again to his course?
Yeah, and it's in the description as well.
Oh, okay, great.
I heard a great quote that I wrote down yesterday that I thought was really, really interesting. And I think it applies to all of us, and it certainly applies to some of the stuff I've been doing. And it sounds a bit harsh, but it was, if you're not where you want to be, you've just not got quite good enough yet. And I think it's really interesting, because I was talking to someone the other day about niching down in terms of what you do, and trying to pick one genre that you're good in but that you really enjoy, and just really go and do your homework in that genre, and analyze a bunch of music that you like, and try and figure out what it is that makes that really work, and try and incorporate it into your tracks. And just coming from a library perspective, we just love it when somebody's like nailed a genre for us, and we're not too concerned about them being good at a load of things. We love go-to guys and girls. I can think of like a guy now who's like, actually came from a taxi listing, who, when I think about rock stuff in our library, I think of this guy's name.
Great.
Straight away. I never met him. I don't know who he is, but he's studied his rock stuff. He's looked at the ingredients. He's worked on it, and he's got it down. And we got a bunch of rock stuff from him, and I wrote to him actually on email. We were having an exchange, and I was like, look, man, I hope you're, from a composer to composer, I hope you're taking your stuff around to other libraries. Not the tracks you gave us, because they were that'd be weird. But you know, I hope that you're taking that around, and the doors are opening for that guy. And
Was
I think
his name Keith?
No, but I think
You know,
yeah, no,
that is,
yeah.
also great at rock.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that just if I could give a piece of advice on that personally from that music library background, is just, it's so worth the time to just get a genre that you like, analyze a whole lot of tracks, figure out ingredients that work, niche down a little bit in it, and you will just find doors open. And the more libraries start taking your tracks, the more libraries will start taking your tracks, because you can write to them and go, I've got these tracks with BMG and these with Extreme and whatever, you know.
Yep.
So yeah,
Success builds success.
yeah. That would be just something that came to mind the other day. It's like, if you get really good at one thing, it's amazing. The doors that open is amazing.
People often chase somebody else's success. Like if somebody who, I use the swampy, I call them alligator killing shows, swampy instrumental stuff that's very frequently just an acoustic guitar, maybe a slide dobro, maybe a harmonic on top of it. You take somebody that's really good at that, and they hear somebody else, another Taxi member, having a lot of success with orchestral, big stuff with, you know, like a trailer orchestra with taiko drums and big stops in it. And they go, God, I'll never be that good. There's so much to learn. It's insurmountable. Dude, just do the swampy alligator killing stuff and become the champion of that, because it opens doors, builds relationships. You get faster with your DAW, you get faster coming up with ideas, all that stuff. Then move on a year or two down the road. But what's the phrase? This is very American sounding. Don't leave the dance with the girl you brung, or something like that. You know, the thing that you're good at naturally, the place where you live musically. Don't feel like you've got to go away, which exactly underscores what you're saying. Find your niche, be great at it, build your credibility, and then branch out.
Yeah, and just quickly, there's a good friend of mine, British guy, who does ridiculously well with library music, like 6-figure, you know, income, does great on it. I mean, he can do a lot of stuff if he was to put his mind to it, but his success is all made off niching down on one thing. He does exceptionally well those little sparse, soft piano type things, right? And he's gone around and it's opened doors with different libraries, and then he's one of the guys I interviewed on the course, and he takes apart one of his tracks that he did for Bang & Olufsen, got a placement on Bang & Olufsen, and he's nailed it. He's nailed it now, and you just listen and you go, great. And you know, again, I guess that's down to, does it drive him mad? I'm sure he does other things, you know, writes other pieces of music. But listen, if we're talking about an income perspective, if we're talking about really nice part-time, full-time income, he just churns those things out, and he's so good. And library's just like, yes, give me more.
We did a thing at the Road Rally about 3 years ago, I believe, with one of our members who's a certified financial planner. And we did a 30-year look at income. That the first year you make like nothing, the second year maybe $1,000, the third year $2,800, the fourth year $3,500, then the next year it drops back to $1,500. Bottom line is you do this and it keeps building over the years. And if you do it if you start at 35 years old, do it till you're 65 years old at a 5% compounded interest rate, assuming that you save, we paid taxes and you saved most of the money, but did allow some for new equipment purchases, you will have, I think it was like $1.27 million in the bank at retirement age. And of course, as a musician, you're not going to retire at 65 and go, well, I'm not making any more library tracks. Right. That's when you're really going to get busy,
right?
Because you've got the time. So I'm a huge proponent of making income doing what you love, which is making music, which is the course that he's teaching.
Yeah.
And check it out, because I did. And you guys know I never point you in the direction of anything that I don't personally believe in. So with that, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's been a pleasure. I've loved it. I hope it's been of use.
Oh, I'm sure it has. And we should talk at dinner tonight, because if you're going to be on the West Coast November 1st through the 4th, you should come to the Road Rally and
Definitely.
be on a panel and teach a class and all that stuff.
Great.
Don't forget the Road Rally coming up November 1st through the 4th here in beautiful Los Angeles. Share. There. Yes. That, and of course, subscribe to our lovely channel. Just to let you guys know, the Road Rally, we have about 1,400 registrants already. Last year at this time, we probably had between 300 and 400 registrants.
It was around
What?
It was around 700.
Last year it was 700 at this time? Okay, so we've got double what we had last year this time. The hotel is almost sold out. I am going to go speak later this week to another hotel on Century Boulevard for overflow. But if you haven't signed up for the Road Rally yet and you want to come, which you really should, because this is the level of stuff that we teach all weekend long. You got to be there or be square. And I will see you guys next week. Oh, next week, our guest is, speaking of composers, Martin Tichy. Remember last year at the Road Rally, I played that beautiful big orchestral trailer piece that was like a Pirates of the Caribbean inspired thing? That guy is going to be my guest next week, and we're going to talk about big orchestral stuff. With that, I bid you adieu. Michael, thank you once again.
Thank you, Michael.
See you in 5 minutes at dinner. Bye, you guys.